episode 27 of the Dorton and Doetkott Debate Podcast. I am Lucas Dorton. I am joined by Mr. Moneybags himself, Nicholas Doetkott. Nick, how are we doing tonight?
I ain't too bad. I'm a little tired. I took like a 3-hour nap today, so we'll see if I can actually fall asleep tonight. But we're here. Not too bad. We're ready to get it. No headband because I was just woke up from a slumber. But,
Hey, you gotta sleep off that fun night that you had. What was it, last night when you made, what was it, like 15 grand or something like that? No.
Yeah. I wish. $325 profit. That's not too shabby either.
You got to bring me with you. Teach me your ways.
I'm telling you, you got to come. I'll show you a good time.
Okay.
I had that whole place going, man.
Yeah, from what you were telling me, you were the movie star. Everyone was crowded around you, seeing what you were gonna do next.
Oh yeah, I was life of the party. I try.
Playing blackjack or what?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's your go-to there.
Yeah. We don't do slots. None of that crap.
I know. I know you win a lot, and I'm sure it's probably because you're hiding some cards in that afro of yours. That's probably why you're winning.
Yep. I can hide aces in here, and they'll never know.
Just slide them through your.
You need that sleight of hand though too. I mean, it's more than just the throw, but yes, I definitely have a nice cover here with this throw I got. Comes in handy.
Well, not all of us were blessed to have as cool of a fro as you, so I'll just sit here with my straight hair and. Nice. So episode 27, folks, we're doing another top 10 list. As you could see from the title, we are going to be doing the top 10 best teams ever. So, what does that incorporate? Well, there isn't a whole lot of rules behind it. We kind of had our own stipulations. Personally, I wanted my team to win it all. If they didn't win it, then they did not make the list. So sorry about it to the Golden State Warriors, who have the best record single season NBA history. They did not make the cut because they did not. It don't mean a thing unless you win that ring. Ain't that right, Nick?
Yes, they did not make my list either.
Wow.
But it's not only because they didn't win it all. I mean, they almost lost to the Thunder in the conference finals too.
They did. They had to come back from a 3-1 lead there.
They had almost as many losses in the playoffs as they did the regular season. So
yeah. So what were your? Did you have any huge stipulations at all? You just kind of base it off of whatever you wanted to.
Yeah, I didn't have many stipulations. So I mean, if we're saying like best season, well then I'd say definitely you have to win it all. But best team, I've always said just because you win the championship doesn't necessarily mean you were the best team that year. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in my stipulations, you didn't have to win. But if you didn't, you had to be very, 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 very good to make it. Mm-hmm. And it turns out, as we get to it, there's only one team on my list that did not win the championship.
Okay.
But for example, like the 1906 Cubs and the 15-16 Warriors, like you mentioned, the best winning percentage of all time in NBA history and the best of MLB history, they didn't win it. If they did, they'd definitely be on my list. But instead, I'd say, they're 11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to win it all, but if you didn't, it was pretty hard to make my list as only one did. But otherwise, I mean, no, I took into play record. Did they win? Did they not? Who was on your team? If you had an MVP, if you had the MVP on your team that year, that's probably a little added benefit. I mean, I didn't look exactly about, who they played that year and whatnot. I mean, it's just so hard to do. I'm not going to go back to 1939 and look at the Yankees opponents.
Yeah.
But, I mean, no strict, no, like, criteria that I really followed all the way through. But,
sure.
I mean, all sorts of things.
I will say
the big one was points for, points against, goals for, goals against other.
I will say that this was probably one of the tougher lists that we've had to do. I don't know about you. I think this is definitely one of the hardest ones that we've had to do, though.
Yes, it is, because for one, you have a lot of history to look at. Two, I mean, it's hard enough ranking who's better between, football teams, but then when you got to do football, basketball, baseball, hockey, and rank them all, it can be kind of hard. And so, yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't easy. I just kind of found the best, 4 from each sport and tried to compare them afterwards. And I don't know, it went all right, but yeah, it wasn't easy, but you know what? That's what makes it fun sometimes. So.
Alrighty, well, what do you say we get into this?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Mr. Duckett, if you want to start us off at number 10, who is your number 10 best team of all time?
Some consider this the best baseball team ever. I don't, as I have it at 10, but it definitely was a good one. The 1998 New York Yankees. They went 114-48 and 11-2 in the playoffs for a total of 125-50, which would be, let's see, quick math. That's winning 5 of every 3 games, huh? I don't know. Let's not do math. Anyway, they had Andy Pettitte, David Wells, David Cohn. So you had 3 very good starters, as well as Orlando Hernandez, and then you had the best closer of all time, unanimous Hall of Famer Mariano Rivera, and Graham Lloyd in the bullpen with, I believe, an ERA under 2 that year. Then you had, it's not like this isn't a Yankees team with, Ruth Gehrig or Mantle and Maris, but you have Posada, Tino Martinez, Bernie Williams, Derek Jeter, Paul O'Neill, Tim Raines, who's, not prime Tim Raines, but Tim Raines. You got Scott Brosius. And then their run differential is plus 309, which, isn't the best of all time, but very, very good. And they scored 965 runs. So, and I believe they swept the Padres in the World Series, if I remember correctly. So I have the 1998 Yankees at number 10.
Okay. Yeah, that's certainly not one of the best Yankee teams of all time in terms of names-wise go.
Yes.
But as far as team-wise, it's very hard to pass them up on the list. So yeah, that's a good one for number 10. For myself, I went with the 75 Cincinnati Reds, starting at the Big Red Machine there. You talk about some of the best players to play the game. Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, Tony Perez, not to mention Pete Rose, who should be a Hall of Famer, but is not.
Yes.
The Reds were the team of the 70s, and, it started off with that run. At 75, they had one of the best lineups ever. They went 108-54, and then they lost only 3 games in the playoffs that entire one. They had a 254 run differential, and they went 64-17 at home, which is the second best in baseball history there. So That's a tough team to beat. I think it's kind of interesting, too, when you look at these sports, that a lot of these teams dominated a decade. They had their decade run.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it really hard to choose, well, out of that decade, which one was the best. Because you could go with a number of different ones.
Like hockey, for example, with the Wayne Gretzky Oilers. It's like, which one of the 4 do you take?
Yeah. But anyways, so I had the Cincinnati Reds at number 10 from 1975.
I like that. So for my number 9, I have the 1985 to 1986 Chicago Bears.
Okay.
Now, this isn't the most offensively powerhouse team. They only average 28.5 points a game, which is good, but it ain't anywhere near, those best offenses ever. And Jim McMahon, who, he ain't shabby, but, let's be honest, it's not like he's some all-time great quarterback. However, they go 15-1 because they allowed 12.4 points a game, possibly the greatest defensive football team in the history of the NFL. And by the way, for my list, I only included the Super Bowl era NFL teams, not the prior ones.
Okay.
They had a team that boasted Walter Payton, arguably the best running back of all time. They had Richard Dent, William Refrigerator Perry, Mike Singletary on defense. You also have McMichael, you got Colbert, you got Hilgenberg. Obviously, those aren't all defensive players. And yeah, and they won the Super Bowl. So, I mean, what else? What more do you have to prove? Chicago Bears.
You know, a team has dominated that. You know that a team has left a huge impression in the league when people are still comparing defenses today in 2020 to that 1985 Chicago Bears team.
35 years later.
35 years later. And that's really what makes it remarkable, that the game has changed so much. And I think sometimes when the game changes, people don't look at stats and teams further back because it was a different game. But this defense was so dominant that you can't not talk about them. Like, it doesn't matter if they played in 1900 or if, they play tomorrow. That's a dominant defense right there.
Yes. And then coached by Mike Ditka, obviously, too.
Yeah, legendary coach. Really solid player, too, I've heard. So for me, at my number 9 team, I have the 89 San Francisco 49ers. You talk about some of the best players to ever play in the NFL history at their respective positions, playing all on the same team. You have Joe Montana, who, I don't think he's a GOAT, but if you want to make an argument, that's fine. I mean, he was a phenomenal player.
Many would say Montana or Brady. So.
Yeah. Jerry Rice, arguably the best wide receiver of all time. Ronnie Lott, again, one of the best players when he played too. That's an extremely solid team. The offense that they had, you would expect for them to score a lot of points, and they did. Their playoff opponents, they beat them by a combined score of 126-26.
Japers crying.
I mean, they outscored them by 100 points.
In 3 games.
With Joe Montana and Jerry Rice as your 2 main offensive guys, I would certainly hope so. He had, at the time, which was a record, Joe Montana, a 112.4 passer rating. In the playoffs, 146.4. So even better. I mean, that's dang near perfect. That is a dang near perfect passer rating throughout the whole playoffs. The backup quarterback, you may have heard of him. His name is Steve Young. I don't know if the name has come across once at all.
Yeah, rings a bell.
Okay. Well, in case you didn't know him, he was a solid quarterback. He was a lefty for the 49ers. But he even threw for over 1,000 yards that season, too. So that just shows how dominant that team was.
Wow. Yeah, like you mentioned earlier with the dynasty, I didn't have them on my list, but one of my honorable mentions is the 84-85 49ers. I mean, there's so many good 49ers teams right there. You know, in large part due to Montana and Rice, and that, possibly is the best one. I mean, that offensive star power is hard to match.
Yeah. Number 8 for you.
The 1977 to 1978 Montreal Canadiens.
Okay.
3rd most points in NHL history with 129. 2nd best winning percentage in NHL history. Goals for 359, but they only allowed 183, which is a goal differential of plus 176. They were 12-3 in the playoffs, and they won the Stanley Cup in 6 games. Some players that they boasted: goalie Ken Dryden, you got Jacques Lemaire, Steve Shutt, and then the MVP Guy Lafleur.
Yeah.
Just a incredibly dominant hockey team. One of many Canadian teams over the years, especially in the 70s. And number 8 for me, Canadian.
Yeah, the Canadians really dominated in the 70s, a little bit into the 80s as well too. I mean, that is just such a lethal team, so lethal. And again, to think that people are still talking about them today, and that's even longer. That's even longer than the 85 Bears.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to our point that we were just saying. It's so hard to pick one team. Like, how can you pick one team from that amazing dynasty at the Canadiens?
And I actually have another one on my list that we will get to.
So. Okay. I'm looking forward to it. Alrighty. So for me at number 8, I had the 2016-2017 Warriors. My opinion, arguably probably the best lineup in NBA history. I would be pretty confident.
Possibly 4 future Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green.
Not to mention Iguodala.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this was a team, obviously, that people remember this year before was the record-setting Warriors team who lost to LeBron in the finals. LeBron and the Cavs blew a 3-1 lead there. The team, what makes them so great is that they probably could have done something similar the next season without Kevin Durant, but they added Kevin Durant, and you knew before the season started that you might just hand the Warriors to Larry O'Brien already because they pretty much already won it.
The only question was, will LeBron somehow be able to beat them? Because you pretty much knew he'd be in the finals. Well, we all see how that went. I mean, they barely won a game. So
I'm really hopeful for LeBron a lot of times. I want him to do well, and I feel very confident when LeBron's going up against just about anyone. But going up against this team, he was going to have to do what he did the finals before and then some. And credit to him, he played well, but that Warriors team is just too lethal. 16-1 in the playoffs. They lost one game in the entire playoffs. So that's one of my opinion, probably the best lineup of all time. Now, I have another NBA team on here too. Very good team. I don't know if the lineup is better, but we'll cross that path when we get there.
I think I know what team that is.
The 2018-19 Nuggets. Okay, you caught me.
Yeah, sure. So I'll move to my number 7.
Yeah.
The 1939 New York Yankees, the second Yankees team on my list. To some, this may be the best professional baseball team ever. They are, I believe, they had the best run differential in baseball history with plus 411. 967 runs scored, only 556 against. Now, again, this team doesn't have, Ruth or Gehrig or Mantle or, obviously not A-Rod, Derek Jeter, some of those Yankees. But they have Joe DiMaggio, Red Ruffing. They got Bill Dickey. And they went 106-45 and swept the World Series 4 games. So, kind of like the 1998 Yankees, it's not maybe the most star-powered Yankees team of all time, but it potentially is the best one. And 106-45. I mean, that's unbelievable. So.
Yeah. Again, you mentioned it there. Best Yankees team of all time. Player-wise, probably not. But again, I mean, you want to name some of those players again that were on that team?
Joe DiMaggio, Red Ruffing, Bill Dickey, Lefty Gomez.
Yeah. Hall of Famers. They're Hall of Famers, but yet they're still not one of the best teams ever do it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. It's just funny because, like the Yankees, like the Oilers teams, those Canadiens teams, like they had some of the best seasons in their respective sports history, but they might not even have been the best team overall in their franchise's history, and that's just what's nuts to me.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I'll move on to mine. For me at number 7, I had the 83-84 Edmonton Oilers. They have a few guys on their team that, Nick, you may have heard of once or twice. Wayne Gretzky,
Does ring a bell.
Doesn't ring a bell. Okay, that's all right.
Sorry. Which Oilers team did you say?
83-84.
Okay.
Yep. Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, Grant Fuhrer, and Paul Coffey. You talk about a juggernaut of a team. So they only went 57, 18, and 5. I stress the only because winning 57 games is an amazing number. But compared to some of these other teams, it isn't the best. Went 15-4 in the playoffs, and they won their first of 5 Stanley Cup wins in the next 7 years. No team in NHL history, Nick, has been able to match the 446 goals scored during the regular season. Okay?
Yep.
To show how amazing their offense was, they scored, which is a record, 36 shorthanded goals, and the team had 6 Hall of Famers. Wayne Gretzky and Paul Coffey, who led the team in points, respectively, combined for 331 points.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is a decent team.
The 83-84 Oilers were in my honorable mentions. I believe that is the best of the 5 Oilers teams you mentioned. And yes, the 446 goals is just unbelievable. I mean, that is crazy. The Canadiens team that I mentioned before, by the way, 359 goals. That's 87 less. And I mean, obviously that Canadiens team I mentioned was very, very good. And they were 87 goals shy. I mean, they allowed way, way, way less goals. But that just shows how offensively potent that Oilers team you just mentioned was. I mean, just unbelievable. 446 goals.
That's video game numbers.
Right? I mean, yeah, impressive.
Alrighty, for what's the number 6 now for you?
Yes. The only team on my list that did not win the championship. If they did, there is a very good chance they would be number 1 on my list. This is the 07-08 New England Patriots, who at the time I wanted so desperately to lose that Super Bowl, and they did. Turns out, I wish they would have won. But I'll just for instance, this team, I mean, it's just unbelievable how good they were. 36.8 points per game, which is second all time to one of the Peyton Manning Denver Broncos teams. But they only allowed 17.1 points a game, which is very good, which gives them a plus 19.7 point differential. They beat their teams by almost 20 points a game. They went 16-0 in the regular season. Would have been 19-0 if it weren't for the heroic Giants Super Bowl win, where, I mean, it was, the David Tyree helmet catch. I mean, you take one of the best and most improbable catches in NFL history away, and the Patriots are 19-0 and probably the best football team ever. Obviously, they have Tom Brady, in my opinion, the best quarterback ever. Randy Moss, best or second best wide receiver ever. In my opinion, he's the best. Wes Welker, Matt Light, Vince Wilfork, Mike Vrabel, Sanjay Samuel, Logan Mankins, Steven Gostowski, plus 315 point differential, best ever, and the best coach of all time, Bill Belichick. I mean, it's just unbelievable how good they were. Randy Moss had, I believe, 24 touchdowns. Brady, 50. I mean, it's just they just stomped you. It was by halftime the game was over. So, like I said, the only reason these guys are at 6 is because they didn't win it. For many, like you, they're not on the list. I get that. But I've always said, just because you don't win it all doesn't mean you're not the best team. However, if they would have won it all, they probably would be my number 1 team in sports history, essentially, for Major 4 professional sports, at least.
And I would probably have a tough time not putting them 1 as well if they had won it all. 2 things I want to mention about that. Number 1, that's the closest Randy Moss has ever gotten to winning a ring. Unfortunately, he didn't really have any. I mean, he had other chances, but that was probably his best.
I mean,
chance.
The Niners won against the Ravens, but I mean, he wasn't a big part of that team. But
I mean, to having a significant role. But and then number 2, imagine having either one of those 2 guys in fantasy that year. You don't need anyone else.
Dude, I've thought that many times. That's what. I mean, I was 10, so I could have known what I was doing for the most part, but I wasn't into fantasy sports yet. But my God, I wish Randy Moss. That's got to be the best fantasy season ever.
Oh, absolutely.
It's got to be. It's got to be.
Yeah.
Especially, and I don't like those leagues, but the leagues with like the long touchdown bonuses, especially those.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't even be fair at that point. Yeah, unbelievable.
So for number 6, I had the 85 Chicago Bears. Again, you mentioned a lot of the main things from that. They ended the season, including with the playoffs, with a record of 18-1, and in a playoff run where they allowed 10 points. Like 10 points? Are you joking? That is the amount of points teams give up in a quarter sometimes. Right? They gave up that amount of points in an entire playoff. Like, that is just stupid good.
0 in the Super Bowl, right?
I think so. Something like that. Again, we mentioned a lot of that 85 Bears defense, how great that defense was. Again, like I said, arguably the best defense to ever play a single season in the NFL. But
I would say they're probably the best. Them and that Ravens team.
Yeah, Ravens as well. But like you already mentioned too, sometimes the defense was so good that some of the offensive guys get forgotten about. Like you mentioned, Walter Payton. He was your running back that you took in our all-time NFL draft. He's arguably the best running back of all time. Oh, you took Barry.
I did take Barry Sanders.
Okay.
I think Walter Payton was second and third.
Okay, yeah. But anyways, nonetheless, that's a extremely solid team. I have them at number 6 for me.
So that's the first team so far that is on both of our lists. That shows how good they were.
Yeah.
For my number 5, I had my first NBA team on the list.
Okay.
I believe, yes. The 1995 to 1996 Chicago Bulls.
Okay.
This is the first full season Michael Jordan had since his retirement, where they went 72-10, which until the 16-17 Warriors, until the 15-16 Warriors went 73-9 was the best regular season record of all time. They go 15-2 in the playoffs for a combined record of 87-12, which is just unfathomable. Obviously, they had Michael Jordan, who won the MVP that year. They had Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Tony Kukoc, Steve Kerr, Ron Harper, Phil Jackson at coach. And of all 6 finals winnings Bulls teams, I would say, most people I would think would agree that this is the best one. And they were just, it was just sheer dominance. There's no other way to describe it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Again, for forever they had the record for the best record in NBA history in a single season, until the Warriors broke that, obviously, a few years back. But an absolutely amazing team, and they're going to be on my list. If that team is not on anyone's list, then you probably shouldn't be making lists, because that's one of the best teams.
Right.
So number 5 for you. So for me, my number 5 team, I had the 1976-1977 Montreal Canadiens. You mentioned, because you had the 77-78 team, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I had the 76-77, so we're just a year separated on that one. But this was a record-setting team. They had 132 points, which is the most in NHL history. They went 68-12, which also set the all-time record for the fewest losses. Say what you want about overtime losses, if they should be counted or not, but technically, yeah. Most regulation, or least amount of regulation losses, was for them.
Only 8 games without scoring a point.
Right. Yeah. The 76-77 Canadiens had a 216 plus 216 goal differential, the best ever, won each game by an average of 2.7 goals. No one else was really coming close to them there. Of the teams count them, 20-goal scorers. Guy Lafleur and Steve Shute led the team. They combined for 116 goals and 241 points. That playoffs, they went 12-2, and then they swept the Stanley Cup. So that's tough. That is tough to beat that. That's for sure. So I have them at number 5 for me. My best hockey team of all time would be the 76-77 Canadiens.
I like that. My number 5 now, or no, 4.
4.
This should make you happy. My number 1 NFL team on the list, the 1972 to 1973 Miami Dolphins. If you could somehow take the 1972 Dolphins and play them against the 2000s, I have a feeling the Patriots would win. However, the Dolphins won the Super Bowl, so I will give them the nod. They are the only undefeated team in NFL history that is, through the postseason.
Yep.
They had 27.5 points a game, so, like the 85 Bears, not great. I mean, not anything, legendary, but only 12.2 points against, which is actually less than that 85 Bears, which gives them a plus 15.3 point differential. And, they didn't boast like any huge names, or not a bunch, but you have Larry Csonka, you have Bob Greasy, and then you have probably the second best coach of all time in Don Shula. So, I mean, just a fantastic team. They celebrate every year as soon as the last undefeated goes down, which I find really fascinating and really fun. And, I mean, the only undefeated team in NFL history, obviously one of the best, and they top my list for NFL teams.
I'm gonna save the talk about them because, I mean, they're gonna be there. They're gonna be on my list yet.
I gotcha.
But anyways, amazing team. So for me, my number 4 best team of all time, I had the 95-96 Chicago Bulls for number 4 for me. I'll show you guys at the end of this my bottom 4, what my paper looks like, because I kid you not, this whole podcast, I've even been changing the order around as we've been going, because I think, well, maybe this team should go here, this team should go here.
Yeah. Order's always the hardest.
So the top 4, that was extremely difficult. I won't show it to you now because I don't want to spoil who I had. But I had the 95-96 Bulls here, number 4 for me. You talked about them a lot already. Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, Kukoc. At the time, best team in NBA history for a while. Like you mentioned, until the Warriors beat it a few years back. This is the best NBA team that won a ring. I don't think it's the best team on paper. I think the Warriors team is better, the 16-17 Warriors, but it's hard to not put this Chicago Bulls team higher because they set a record. I mean, regardless of how the game was played then, because the game has changed a decent amount from then to now, to set the record for a single season most amount of wins is it's hard to pass that up. So like I said, I think the 16-17 Warriors overall maybe roster is better, but I think this Bulls team is probably an extremely close second. But what I have them over them was because they set the record for the most amount of wins. So that was kind of my deciding process of why I had them.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the Bulls at number 4.
All right. For my number 3, my best MLB team ever for modern era, and probably the best ever anyways, the third baseball team on my list, all 3 of them are Yankees. The 1927 New York Yankees. Now, Dorton, I'll put you on the spot. Do you remember what that team was nicknamed? Or that lineup specifically?
Murderers Row.
Yes.
Murderers Row.
Lou Gehrig, you got Lazary, you got Combs, and you have the great Bambino, Babe Ruth. I mean, he had, I believe, 60 home runs a year, and Gehrig had like 43. Yeah. He won 110 and 44, swept the World Series 4-0. 975 runs, 599 against, with a plus 376 run differential. Now, plus 411 was the 1939 Yankees, which I believe was the best ever, which is plus 35 more. But, I mean, this Yankees team had 4 more wins and 1 less loss. You have Ruth and Gehrig, who are potentially the 2 best Yankees ever.
Yeah.
2 of the best players ever. And you also have Waite Hoyt, who was the ace of that squad, who was unbelievable. And, I mean, like you said, Murderer's Row. I mean, it's potentially the scariest lineup you've ever seen. You know, I mean, it's just unbelievable. So I have the 1927 Yankees at number 3 on my list.
Yeah, that is an amazing team. You know, when you talk about some of the best players to ever play our game, a lot of those guys are going to be on that 1927 Yankees team. So that's an unbelievably solid team there for sure. So for my number 3 team, you don't have to wait too long. I have my 1972 Miami Dolphins, folks, at number 3. Now, this team, undefeated, okay? And undefeated means, if you wouldn't mind explaining that to the fans.
As LeVar Ball would say, never lost.
Never lost.
Never lost.
So they did not lose one time. They had Bob Greasy, arguably one of the better quarterbacks to play our game. Larry Zonka, one of the best running backs. Solid players, Mercury Morris, Paul Warfield. Jim Kick, also extremely solid backup quarterback who just passed away today. At 73, he had dementia, but one of the better running backs to play our game. A lot of people do not remember, because I'm sure a lot of people weren't born, like myself, but the starting quarterback for that team, Bob Greasy, had a season-ending injury 5 games into the season. So the backup quarterback, Morale, came in, brought them the rest of the way, leading them to the undefeated season, and then winning the Super Bowl as well, too.
Yeah, it shows how good of a roster they had if the backup quarterback can go, 9-0 in the regular season and then win the Super Bowl?
Yep. Now, why some people might not have them as high on our list, they had a combined winning percentage of the teams that they played of 400, which isn't the best, but my thing is you got to beat the schedule that's in front of you.
And I mean, we can compare it to some other all-time great teams, and yes, there probably is a little easier. But when you don't lose, that means every single team you play, that's one loss, give it to them. So it's going to affect their winning percentages. It's kind of like how everybody always complains about how the Patriots play such an easy schedule. It's like, well, when they go 14-2 every year, that's 14 losses they're dealing out. That's part of the reason why. Yeah. So, I mean, but yes, I mean, it was an easier schedule, but still, it's not like they were playing, every team they were playing was 2-14, or that back then would have been 2-12. I mean, and you can only play the teams put in front of you, and you can't possibly tell me that teams they played in the playoffs in the Super Bowl weren't good and they handled them. So, by the way, they were underdogs in the Super Bowl. Yeah, that's crazy. I suppose it's because they had a backup quarterback, but still, they were 16-0 at the time. Mm-hmm. And the Washington Redskins were the 1-point favorite.
Yeah, that's crazy. But anyways, now we crack into our top 2. Who'd you have as the second best team of all time?
The best NHL team ever, agreed upon by you, the 1976 to 1977 Montreal Canadiens. I had the 77-78 squad at 8. I had the 76 to 77 squad at 2. You did say they were the best ever, right? NHL team?
Yeah, the Canadiens, the 76-77, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You pretty much mentioned it already, but they went 68-12, most points ever, first in winning percentage, 12-2 in the playoffs, swept the finals, 387 goals and only 171 against, which is a plus 216 goal differential, which I believe is also the best of all time. I'm not positive on that. Guy Lafleur, MVP that year, as he was the 77-78 season. You got Yvonne Fournier, Steve Shute, Larry Robinson, Guy Lapointe. And I think the most impressive thing about this team, I mean, obviously Guy Lafleur is unbelievable, but I don't think there's the star power that some of those Oiler teams with Gretzky and Messier and Coffee had, or even those Penguins teams. You know, you got Lemieux, Yager, you got all sorts of all-time greats with even the Blackhawks teams as of late.
Mm-hmm.
But these teams were just so deep. These Canadian teams. You mentioned before, I think you said they had 8 20-goal scorers on that team. I mean, just so deep. And typically, what separates good teams or great teams from good teams, or great teams or greater teams from great teams, are the depth of your roster. Kind of like the Twins this year. I'm not going to act like they're one of the best all-time greats, but the reason they were so good is their lineup. You know, the Twins didn't boast any. You know, they didn't have Mike Trout or you know, Aaron Judge or any guys like that. But 1 through 9, their roster's so good, their lineup. So there's no easy outs. Well, this Canadian team, every line you put out there, they're good. Every player you put out there, you know, they're almost better than their counterpart that they're playing against. I mean, just so deep, and I think that's what made them so great. 132 points, you know, 68 and 12. I mean, just unbelievable. So they come in at number 2 on my list and the number 1 NHL team ever.
I don't care, you know, how much you value when teams played, but still today, that is an unbelievably difficult number to reach. All of the records that they have still today shows how difficult it is to be broken.
Yes.
So, yeah, we both agree best NHL team of all time.
Which, by the way, I had 2 NHL teams on my list. They were both the Canadiens. The Oilers would be my third, the 83-84 team that you mentioned. But the 2 hockey teams on my list were the Canadian teams in back-to-back years.
My number 2 team, I had Murderers Row 1927 New York Yankees. Probably one of the most unfathomably offensive-heavy teams in MLB history. They won 110 games. Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs, 164 RBIs, and hit 356.
164 RBI.
Yeah, that's a stupid number.
More than one a game.
It hit 102 more home runs on the season than the next closest American League team. I mean, that's
how many more?
102.
Wow.
102 more. Lou Gehrig won the MVP that season. I can't remember if you mentioned that or not.
I didn't actually realize that. Ruth hit 60 and he didn't win it, huh?
Well, once you hear this stat line, you'll probably understand why. So Ruth hit 60, but Lou Gehrig hit 47 home runs, drove in 175, and had a 373 batting average. I mean, imagine hitting 60 home runs, hitting over 350, and driving in over 160, and you finish second to the guy on your same team. I mean, that's unbelievable.
God.
That's unbelievable.
I mean, probably the best duo to ever live.
Yeah.
At least baseball. I mean, just unbelievable.
Yeah. So, number 1, Nick, who'd you have as your best team of all time?
The 2016 to 2017 Golden State Warriors.
Okay.
No, you've mentioned them a lot. You have the Bulls that you mentioned the 95, 96 Bulls. Yes, they're great. However, I think the 16-17 Warriors, I find it hard to believe you can give me a better squad in any sports history. They went 73-9 in 15 and 16, and they added one of the best NBA players to ever live, Kevin Durant. One of the best scorers to ever live, Kevin Durant. You added him to a 73-9 squad. I realize that 73-9 squad didn't win the finals, but, I mean, let's be honest. They were one of the best teams ever. And then you add Kevin Durant. They go 67 and 15. You have Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, potentially 4 Hall of Famers. In NBA standards, it's not that hard. So, I mean, that might be 4 Hall of Famers, not to mention Andre Iguodala. They went 16-1 in the playoffs. They swept the West. They went 12-0, which, by the way, it looked like that year was going to be it looked like both teams were going to sweep going into the finals. The Warriors went 12-0, and the Cavs were like 10-0, and then the Celtics finally beat them in the conference finals, or they might have even been 11-0. Anyways, the Warriors were undefeated going into the finals, ended up winning in 5, so they go 16-1. I believe. No. I was gonna say Curry was MVP that year, but he wasn't. Russell Westbrook was. But I mean, to dismantle LeBron and the Cavs the way they did, you have to be pretty darn good. I mean, let's be honest. That Cavs team is pretty good, and LeBron's one of the greatest ever. In our opinion, he's the best. And like I said, you go 73-9, and you add Kevin Durant. I find it hard to believe that any NBA team. I don't know if an NBA team could even make it to 7 games against these teams. I mean, I'm sure some of those Lakers, Celtics teams, and the Jordan Bulls teams could, but I would definitely take this Warriors team over any NBA team in NBA history. No doubt in my mind. You have Stephen Curry and Kevin Durant. I mean, that's
Klay Thompson is your 3. I mean, he's your 3rd best player at that point.
And potentially, and Draymond Green and Andre Iguodala, I don't know if they're the best 2 defenders because you got Thompson there, but you can put them 2 on essentially anybody, whether it's a point guard or a center, and it doesn't take away, and it's not like you're relying on their offense. So they can go all out on defense, and you still have your best 3 offensive players.
Yeah.
Don't have to exert themselves the way some Jordan and Pippen probably would have had to defensively for the Bulls.
Yeah.
Because you have Iguodala and Green there. I mean, I like I said, I can't see any NBA team beating them in the 7-game series. At least, I mean, if they have multiple 7-game series, fine. But I'm taking the Warriors over anybody ever, and I find it hard to believe there's any team in major 4 professional sports history better than them. So that's my number 1.
My number 1 team, you had them at 10. I have them at 1. The 1998 New York Yankees.
Really?
I have them as the best team ever. 114-48. Okay, so that's the most wins by a team that would win the World Series. Throughout the playoffs, that increased their overall standings to 125-50. Okay, now I am not a math major, but I think I can do this simple math. They went 11-2 in the playoffs. Okay, 11-2. All right, that's pretty decent. They had 4 300 hitters, 4 20 home run hitters. You mentioned some of the players on the team, some of the pitchers, David Cohn, Wells, Andy Pettitte. They each won 16 games at least and had more than 140 strikeouts. And then you have, in case that one of those guys can't finish out the game for you, let's bring in the best closer of all time, Mariano Rivera. I mean, that is an unbelievably difficult team to beat. I think the 27, like I said, maybe had better players on the 27 Yankees. I think the better team was the 98 Yankees, though, overall.
I mean, I think part of the reason I only have them at 10, which, I mean, maybe shouldn't be, but I think the fact they don't have any of those big time players, I mean, besides Jeter, but, we're not big Jeter guys, I think is maybe part of the reason I had them at 10.
Sure.
Because it just might lack star power that those 39 and the 39 and the 27 teams have, or at least the 27 team.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know. I would still take the 27. I mean, 114-48, but win percentage-wise, that's worse than the 110-44. So, I don't know. But, I mean, clearly they're good. And a lot of people would agree with you that they're the best MLB team ever. And they swept the World Series. So, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're good. They're very good. I mean, I would side with the 27.
Sure.
98, I mean, you can't really go wrong. I mean, there's so many good Yankee teams.
You can't. But anyways, that's our teams. That's our best top 10 of all time, folks. Make sure you give us teams that would be on your top 10 list of all time. Maybe number 1. Maybe it's different than ours. Maybe it's the same as ours. Who knows? It always is interesting to see what other people throw out there for that. To see some different opinions, different views on things for sure is always cool. But anyways, that was this episode. Now, Nick, I believe we had another poll last week. I believe we did it for the best NBA team of all time. Would you care to did you see the results of that poll by any chance?
I think I could guess them.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just tell you so you don't have to guess because I know who won. It was me again. So, thank you to the fans. I won all 4 of our top sports all-time drafts. NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL. Nick, that is a count 'em 4-0 sweep.
Yeah, I think the fans just feel bad for you, so they wanted to make you feel a little better.
I don't know about that. So thank you, fans, for voting me. Obviously, the fans know greatness when they see it. because I won all 4 times. So, again, thank you very much. I appreciate that to the fans at home. Thank you. But, anyways, next week will be episode 28. Again, we'll figure out what we'll do. We'll send out a tweet, let you all know. Hopefully, again, it sounds like sports end of July probably will be picking up again, is kind of what I've been hearing a little bit. So hopefully that's the case. So we can have some more to talk about besides doing top 10 lists. As fun as they are, we need a little more to talk about sometimes. But if you would like to follow any of our Twitter accounts, you can follow myself at Lucas_Dorton, capital L, capital D. If you want to follow Nick, it is at Doetkott or Doetkott, whatever is easier for you to type out in the Twitter handle to spell, one of those two. And then for our Twitter page, at DND_podcast, capital D's, capital P for that. Make sure you share this with your friends, share this with your family, give us a subscribe. Let us know what you think. If you have any recommendations of stuff that you want us to talk about, or if you want to be on a show, let us know. We can try and make that happen. But anyways, as for myself and Mr. Nicholas Doetkott, until next week, we are out.